Here's a staggering reality check. Nearly 2 billion people follow Islamic economic principles that fundamentally challenge our global financial system. Yet most of us have no idea how or why this creates such tension in our modern world.
That's such an intriguing perspective. What exactly makes these principles so disruptive to the current system?
Well, it all connects to what we might call the power elite, that top 1% controlling global markets and media narratives. These CEOs, banking executives, and policymakers have built entire empires on financial practices that Islamic principles directly challenge.
Hmm. Could you break down those specific challenges? What makes them so threatening to established institutions?
So here's what's fascinating. Islamic banking prohibits interest-based lending, which is basically the foundation of modern banking. We're talking about a complete reimagining of how financial institutions make money. Instead of interest, they operate on profit sharing and risk sharing principles.
You know what's really interesting about that? It's almost like a parallel financial universe operating alongside our conventional system.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more complex. Islamic economics emphasizes ethical investment and requires tangible assets backing financial transactions. This directly contradicts many modern financial instruments that these elite institutions rely on for their profits.
That really puts all these negative media portrayals in a different light, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And here's another layer. Islamic principles prioritize community welfare over individual profit maximization. Think about mandatory charitable giving through zakat, wealth distribution mechanisms, and strict rules against speculation. These concepts fundamentally challenge the consumer driven, individualistic economic model dominating global markets.
Well, that's exactly why we see such coordinated messaging across different platforms, isn't it?
Right? And what's particularly clever is how these economic motivations are masked behind cultural and religious narratives. The average person consuming media isn't thinking about these economic undertones, they're just absorbing the surface level messaging.
So it's almost like a sophisticated form of misdirection, using cultural differences to hide economic concerns.
Yes, and here's something really ironic. Many of these same principles are being repackaged and promoted under different labels. Like when we talk about ESG investing, social responsibility, and stakeholder capitalism, they're essentially promoting similar values, but in a more palatable package for Western audiences.
That's fascinating. So, why do these ideas become more acceptable when they're stripped of their religious context?
Well, it comes down to control and narrative ownership. When these principles come from established financial institutions, they're seen as innovative and progressive. But when they're associated with Islamic finance, they're often portrayed as threatening to the established order.
You know, this reminds me of how certain disruptive technologies are initially resisted by established industries until they figure out how to co opt them.
That's such a perfect analogy. And it helps explain why we see such coordinated efforts across different sectors, from media to entertainment to politics, to maintain certain narratives about Islamic principles and practices.
And I imagine social media amplifies these narratives exponentially.
Exactly. And here's what makes it even more complex. These economic motivations often intersect with geopolitical interests. Like, consider how Islamic finance principles could potentially challenge the dominance of certain currencies or financial centers.
That really highlights how these seemingly cultural conflicts often have much deeper economic and political roots.
And you know what's really eye opening? Once you understand these underlying dynamics, you start seeing similar patterns everywhere. It's like putting on economic x ray glasses. Suddenly, you can see through surface level conflicts to the power dynamics underneath.
So, what do you think the future holds for these competing economic systems?
Well, looking ahead, I think we're going to see more hybrid systems emerging. As younger generations demand more ethical and sustainable financial practices, we might actually see more adoption of principles that Islamic finance has been promoting for centuries, just under different names and frameworks.